Welcome to this Ray Talk. Today, the theme will be living in faith. Sandra and I have been processing this issue about faith for a couple of weeks now, and we did a little inner assessment, and I'm going to ask you to do the same. So on a scale of 1 to 10 or percentage, like what is your percentage of faith right now? We were very shocked to see that our faith was not at 100%. I think a couple of weeks ago, we were saying our faith was around 65%. And then we said, well, wow, we better give our attention to this issue if that's what we're getting. So we started reading everything we could find in A Course in Miracles on Faith. Sandra ordered about, I don't know, half a dozen books on Amazon, all on the subject of faith, which most of them didn't answer the question at all. So we were really immersing ourselves in this question about faith. And I think as we were beginning to question ourselves, our faith was actually increasing. That's a very interesting phenomenon because Tara Singh used to talk about attention and what you give your attention to. He said that attention is far better than seeking a how. Seeking a how. You know, when somebody would say to you, well, what's your faith level? And you'd say, well, it's not very high. Then probably your next question would be, well, how do I increase my faith, right? That's what we're all conditioned to do in our educational system is seek a how or seek a method. What if there is no method? I want to pose this to you today. What if attention is all we need? So what I mean by attention is the very question itself. When you say, what is my level of faith? You're giving faith attention. And as you give attention to something, you see what is actually there, okay? It's the attention is the energy. And the energy of that attention shows you what is actually there. So when you're asking yourself, well, what is my faith? That's attention. And then you see, wow, maybe I don't have much faith. And that is where you are right now. And just in seeing that and giving that attention increases your faith. And the more you give it attention, the more you understand what faith is, the more you start to receive it. And I think this is not without the help of the Holy Spirit, where I would say everyone here has a pretty strong connection to supernatural forces. You, first of all, you believe there are supernatural forces. And then second, you trust you have some access to that. Well, what actually gives us the access to these supernatural forces is our attention. So attention and what that is that we're looking at are become closer together. So let's just say we give attention to faith and we're really looking at it. We're saying, well, what is faith? Do we have it? What's our level of faith? All those kinds of questions. We're focused on faith, right? In that focus, you're increasing the energy and you're bringing in those supernatural forces to help you really understand what this important issue is. So attention is superior to asking, how do I do it? Actually, if you leave the how do I do it out, it increases the energy. Because how do I do it is a distraction. Because usually with the how, it's like somebody's going to give you a bullet point list or this or that, and then you go over there and you focus on that. You're actually going away from the issue, not closer to it. If the issue is faith and you want a to-do list, and then you go and you preoccupy yourself with all kinds of this and that and meditation and stick my foot behind my ear and all these things I have to accomplish, you're actually moving away from the faith, not closer to it. So that's the first point I wanted to make in this lecture, was that just your attention alone to any subject is going to increase the energy. It's going to invoke higher forces to help you. So it's attention we have to understand within ourselves. So good. So Sandra and I were giving a lot of attention to faith over the last couple of weeks. And we were seeing, well, gradually, yes, our faith's increasing. We're not totally at 100%, but we are going up the scale. And that was very good news. We were like testing each other every day. Well, what's your level today? Oh, well, I'm up at 70% today. Oh, yeah, well, it's better than yesterday. I was only at 60%. Well, the tendency is to look at all those things in your life that you don't like, right? And then you say, well, gosh, these things have been around for a long time. They're like chronic, they're persistent. And will I ever get over it? Will I ever solve this problem? And then the more you question yourself about it like that, it's like doubt comes in and then faith goes out, right? So doubt and yeah, kind of a disappointment, kind of a low level disappointment is there. And then the more attention we give to that disappointment, the less faith we have. And it's just like a downward spiral. So part of faith is keeping your mind out of those mental traps where you're going into this analytical, you're using the past as a reference point. You're even using the present as a cause for not having faith. You're saying, well, yeah, but I've still got that symptom, and oh, will I ever get over it? Probably not. And you know, those kinds of thoughts. So we have to be careful about that. You know, negative thinking, there's a kind of a negative thinking that looks at your negative thinking and gives it up. Well, that's a different kind than the actual negative thinking. You're saying, wow, I'm really indulging in negative thinking here. I'm really indulging in doubt. And I'm really, not in this space of faith. Well, it's necessary to see that. But then once you see it, you have to be willing to drop it. Like, I love the lesson today. I think some of you, I think maybe all of you are on this Course in Miracles thing we're doing. And it was, I can escape from the world I see by giving up my attack thoughts. It was a very interesting lesson. And then it said, there are 3 steps in this. One is, first, you have to see that you have attack thoughts. That's number 1. And then 2, you have to be willing to give them up. And then 3, you have to see this other world that God created that's very lovely, and it's like doesn't have attack thoughts. And they said in the lesson, the first 2 steps are your responsibility. But the 3rd step, you don't have to do that because God has already done that. God has already created the real world, it's called in the Course in Miracles, or Christ's vision. God has already given you Christ's vision to see this forgiven world, this real world, and that real world is already there. It's already set up. It's already complete. But your only job is to see how you have projected a meaningless world full of attack thoughts, full of the past, full of, what can I say, fear, full of anger, full of guilt. You've projected that world, and that's all your attack thoughts, right? All of that, and it's vengeful. Yesterday it said, what I see is a form of vengeance, right? And Sandra was saying, I hate this lesson. It's like, well, it's trying to get you to see like this kind of hell we made up, right? And it's not pleasant looking at that. And the lesson's putting your face right in it. And then now today it says, well, you can escape that horrible world you made up by first, one, seeing you made it up with your attack thoughts. And you can give up those are your responsibility. Seeing that you made it up and letting it go. And then this other part is the God-given world. Now that's where the faith comes in. The faith is in trusting that that God-given world is actually there even when you don't see it. Because if you're seeing the world through your attack thoughts, and you're seeing the world through your symptoms and your fears and your everything that's not right with my life, you know, if you're seeing through that filter, you definitely are not going to be seeing the God-created world. And then this deeper part in the text was saying, the ego wants to reconcile those two. Like, okay, you've got this world over here that's your sort of polite hell, and you've got this world over here that's your release from that, and the God-created world. Now, the ego wants to try to reconcile so that it can keep both those things going. And then it says, well, yes, but that's not possible. And what it's actually doing is keeping the attack thoughts going, and you never really step out. You can't have heaven with a piece of hell in it. It's just simple. Like, but the ego thinks it can. The ego thinks it can give up, it can keep its judgments, it can keep its attack thoughts, and somehow find some little secret way to slip into heaven too, but also keep all this other junk, right? So it's got two always going. And well, that's the epitome of conflict. That's the epitome of a meaningless world. That's the epitome of attack thoughts. And that's the exact opposite of faith, because the ego has no faith. The ego doesn't have faith that there is a forgiven world and there is this beautiful world, and we can be in that constantly. It would say, well, yeah, through sickness and health till death do you part. So all relationships are based on that. Well, you better just expect that you're going to fight, and you better just expect that you're going to get sick, and you better just expect that eventually you're going to die. I mean, this is the ego's thought system, right? So we're trying to escape from that, because that's full of attack thoughts. It's the exact opposite of faith. And you can't reconcile the two. You can't have faith in that system. That's why it says, I can escape from the world I see, which is the vengeful world, the meaningless world, the world of the past, all those things that the first lessons in the Course have been pointing out to us. I can escape from that world by one simple action, and that's giving up my attack thoughts. So that's the beginning of faith. That's like the juncture in your mind where the supernatural comes in and the ego goes out. It's like when I see that I've made up this world with my attack thoughts, with my judgments, with my fears, with my angers, with my guilts. I've projected that onto this world, including your body, by the way. Your body is part of that world. Well, I've projected onto that world and my body is just printing it out somehow. Then you see that. And you don't even have to really know how to give it up. You're going to say, well, how do I give it up? And again, it's like we're seeking a how. Try to stay out of that pitfall, because I know it's very subtle and it's very enticing. We're always going to want to say, how do I do it? And then once we go that direction, it's like we're lost. You have to stay in that point where you feel a little bit uncomfortable and you don't know how, and that's exactly where you need to be, because that's where faith comes in. You could ask, well, what do you mean, Marcus, by faith? I don't know what you mean. Well, that's exactly what I mean. You only need faith when you don't know what you're doing. And you can only get the faith when you admit you don't know what you're doing. If you had certainty and you say, well, okay, I do A, B, and C, and I've arrived. Well, that's okay, that's clear, that may work, may not, but that's clear, it doesn't require faith. Faith is actually when you're facing the unknown and there's a way out of it, or there's a higher way being shown to you. That's faith. That's the definition of faith. There's an element of the unknown in faith. There has to be, or it wouldn't be faith. Well, what do you mean by an element of the unknown? Well, there's a direction, or there is a doorway we need to pass through. Maybe we're not quite clear what that doorway is, or where it is, or how to go through it, but we trust. That's another element of faith. It has trust. We trust that we will be shown the way, or we will be given the way by these supernatural forces, right? And those supernatural forces are going to lead us through into this world without attack thoughts. World without attack thoughts. A forgiven world, Christ's vision, heaven on earth. What do you want to call that? You might have your own phrase for it. Nirvana, liberation, salvation. These are all words for the same thing. But getting there through that door requires faith, requires trust, requires stillness in the face of not knowing. Not knowing. That's a good place to be. If we can get into that place of not knowing, we're very close to the faith, very close to this trust in unknown forces that are on our side. I keep remembering this incident where Tara Singh had spent some, or was planning to spend these years in silence, right? This was before the silence. And Krishnamurti was his teacher. And he had also gone through quite a few lessons already with Krishnamurti. There was a point where Krishnamurti said to him, go and earn some money or I'll never see you again. And then he went and he earned the money. And that was a whole story in itself. But okay, so once he'd done that and before the silence, he asked Krishnamurti, he says, does life really take care of you? Life, not all my plans. I'm not talking about that, or not all my skills that I use to do stuff. He says, life. Does life take care of you? And Krishnamurti said, yes, when you completely let go, completely let go, he said, when you completely let go. Well, let's look at that statement, completely let go. What does that mean? You're going to completely let go. You know, in ancient writings, they have this analogy of a leap of faith, right? And I remember in one of the Albrecht Dürer prints, I forget which one it was, but there was this picture in the background of a cliff, right? This sort of a craggy cliff. And then on top of the cliff, there's this, I don't know, mountain goat or something standing on the edge. And it was very symbolic of this leap of faith. You know, we have this kind of analogy of throwing ourselves off the cliff into the care of God or the care of our Creator, and then having to trust that God's going to catch us, right? So this leap of faith, many writers have written about that. So this is what Krishnamurti was saying. Well, yes, when you completely let go, life will take care of you. But that's a tall order, because what the ego comes up with is, oh, well, what do you mean? How am I going to get by? And I better do this, that, and the other thing. And how do you do it? And how do you do it? That's the first thing an ego is going to say. Well, how do I let go? And how do I not plan and calculate and keep on my path that I've already created for myself? Well, that's what completely let go is. You let go of all that. You don't seek a how. There is no how. Only attention. Attention brings the space. Attention invokes the unknown. Now, when I say unknown, I'm talking about a benevolent force, not a malevolent force. You know, many of us, when we think about unknown, we have this kind of malevolent association with it, like, oh, it's gonna throw a lot of things at me that I can't cope with. Disasters are going to happen, catastrophes are going to happen in the unknown. You know, this is all part of our psychic makeup. When I say unknown, it brings up fear. So this is all that things that you have to face when you're asking yourself about faith. How much of it do I have? Do I really have faith? So if I'm going to tell you completely let go, you're going to need faith in order to do that. And this is not from the ego. Faith is something that your higher self provides for you when you're making these big steps in your spiritual evolution. So your higher self is, well, let's just say Jesus or Babaji or the Dream Team or whatever you see as that higher power helping you. They're going to give you the things you need to increase your faith. You start seeing miracles happen. You start seeing things lining up. You start seeing that you are taken care of. One of the best ways that Sandra and I get over this fear of the unknown is we say to ourselves, well, what does the last 10 years of our life look like? You know, we sort of ask ourselves that. And then we say, well, we were able to pay our rent, right? Yes. We were able to feed ourselves, right? Yes. We were able to travel around the world 10 times. Yes. All those things were provided, right? Yeah, right. And we had all the means. We didn't go into debt. We didn't go bankrupt. We had all the money we needed to do whatever we needed. Yes. Well, okay, based on the last 10 years, what do you think the next 10 years is going to be? And we're even wiser now. So shouldn't it be better? Even if we do leap into faith? Well, of course it will be. Of course it'll be more productive. Of course it'll be more to the point. Of course it's going to help more people. And, you know, we're doing a lot of these programs now, and we're absolutely loving them. We're doing more YouTubes, we're doing more free things, we're doing more things like this, Ray Talks. We're very in a creative, absolutely creative mode of our life right now. And it's very exciting. So, well, how did we get there? Well, faith, trust, moving forward. Oh, so the caveat when Tara Singh asked Krishnamurti, does life take care, right? And Krishnamurti said, yes, when you completely let go. And then the caveat was, but not if you're lazy. And that was kind of funny. Actually, Tara Singh added that when he was sharing the story with us. And he says, but not if you're lazy. Oh, and furthermore, never take advantage of another. That was part of it too. So you have to reach this point in yourself where you have certainty, you're not lazy, you're productive, and you're not taking advantage of anyone else. Because Tara Singh had been a businessman, right? So he was very good at figuring out how to get the advantage over other people. And I think Krishnamurti sensed this. And he said, and never take advantage of another. So that was a little different. He wasn't used to that. But he took the leap of faith. And then shortly after that is when he found this place in Carmel to spend the years in silence. And that place was provided. You know, even that was provided for him. He had done this work that Krishnamurti had directed him to go and earn the money. And he had been taking care of the Dalai Lama's teacher in New York. And then after that whole thing was over with, or in the middle of, these Tibetan monks came to him, and they were so appreciating him for taking care of their teacher. They gave him some of these Tibetan Thangka paintings, a roll, and these were authentic. They were like, you know, a couple hundred years old. They were the real thing from, you know, ancient times. So they were museum quality works. And he was able to sell those paintings to different museums and galleries. And this was back in the 60s. So he had made $60,000 in 3 months, which back then was probably more like 600,000, right? So then he went to Krishnamurti and said, well, I've got $60,000 now, and I could make another 60,000. What do you want me to do? And he said, that's plenty. So then that's the money he used to finance himself while he was in these 3 years of silence. So he went to Carmel. And he said, well, where do I want to go? I want to go to a beautiful place by the ocean, somewhere I can walk on the beach. So he went to Carmel and he asked around. And then he found this place that had been, they were turning it into kind of a community center, but it was a house. And then the people passed away, right? So the place was in escrow or in an estate, and they didn't want it to just sit empty. So they gave it to Tara Singh for very little rent. And he had this whole place to himself. And he took me there once and I saw it, and it had beautiful gardens and a little pavilion where he did his meditations every day. So it was the perfect place for him to be. And if you've ever been to Carmel, you know, it's like this kind of Hansel and Gretel, very picturesque little town on the sea. And it's just extremely beautiful. So he spent his years in silence there. But it was all provided. The point I'm making is Krishnamurti said yes when you completely let go. And then, okay, he did. And then he went and he earned this money. And before that, he didn't know how he was going to earn the money, right? He had been taking care of the Dalai Lama's teacher. And then all of a sudden, these monks came and gave him these priceless paintings that he was able to sell. And then the money that he generated, he helped them, you know, in their plight. You know, the Tibetans around that time were, you know, the whole story, kicked out of China, and they were really suffering. So he raised money for them, and he also raised the money for himself to spend these years in silence. And that was before, you know, before he had no idea. And then Krishnamurti said, life does take care when you completely let go, which he did. And then he made the money, and then he had the money for the silence. So all that is related to faith. All that is related to when you are determined to see things differently. Like that was a couple days ago, right? That lesson, I am determined to see things differently. Well, that seeing is part of the faith. It's not a how. It's I am determined to see things differently. I'm determined to give up my attack thoughts. I am determined to give up my doubts. Well, how am I going to do it? He said, go and earn money. I have no idea. Then he said, don't take advantage of anybody. How am I going to do that? You know, so all these questions the ego is going to throw at you, and to faith, they don't mean anything. Throw yourself into the unknown. I mean, of course, it was Krishnamurti giving him the directions. Well, but don't we have equal lofty directions? The Course in Miracles are words from Jesus. What's the difference? None. They're words from an enlightened being. So if we can't trust those words, then who can we trust? So that was the point. Tara Singh implicitly trusted Krishnamurti for anything Krishnamurti said, and Krishnamurti gave him the directions, and he followed them. Just like Jesus is giving us the directions in the lessons of the Course, and we follow them. And by following them, we ignite our faith, we ignite our trust, and then miracles can happen. Miracles happen. Definitely. Demonstrably. More than 5 years ago, we were in Bali and we got this direction, move to Washington, D.C. Jiminy, we were pretty comfortable in Nashville. Why do we have to move to DC? Well, okay, we got the direction, move to DC. It felt right. It felt like, okay, this is real direction here from upstairs. Within 3 months, we were here. Now, our rent doubled. We didn't like that too much. But we knew it was part of the plan, right? So it took us to a new level of finances. We started actually doing better financially, and the rent was no problem. And our space increased, not only in actual space, but in the beauty of the neighborhood, the beauty of our apartment. Our ceilings went from like, I don't know, 10 feet to 14 feet. So we have much more of a sense of spaciousness here. So it was an improvement in all directions. And it was necessary because, you know, we need to have our energy here in DC for the benefit of the rest of the country. So it was actually the best move we could have made. But we had to really rely on faith. And, you know, we didn't seek this apartment. We had a student, Patty, who had been with us in Bali, and she lived in Virginia, and she looked around in DC and found this place and said, this is the perfect place for you. We said, fine, we trust you. We put the money down and we moved here sight unseen. And it was 5 times better than what we had in Nashville. And we didn't even have to find it. Now, I'd say that was a miracle, activated by the fact that we had faith in that action. So that's how faith operates. It doesn't need to know how. It has certainty that it's moving in the direction of your divine destiny. And if you're moving in the divine destiny of your own life, the divine takes care of things. Like Krishnamurti said, when you completely let go, life does take care of you in very specific ways. For us, it was like, okay, the place was found, the money was there. We didn't even have to move our stuff. We were like going to India at that time with the India Quest, and we had a lady in Nashville meet the truck. We left for India, and this lady with her newborn child we befriended met the moving van at our apartment in Nashville, made sure everything was, you know, loaded up. And then when the moving van got to here, DC, our friend in Virginia met the truck here and oversaw them delivering all of our things. And not only that, she unpacked everything and put all of Sandra's clothes away in the closet, all the dishes away in the cupboards. The only thing we had to do was hang the artwork. That she was a little not so sure how we would like it. So she had the furniture all in place, the beds up and everything, all the clothes put away, dishes put away, boxes unpacked. And all we had to do was hang the artwork. And that was all provided. We didn't have to even think about it. So we didn't even need a how. Well, how are you going to do it? Well, we didn't know. It was all provided. Life took care when we completely let go, which we did. Threw ourselves off the cliff, so to speak, of faith. So we have enough of these, I would call them demonstrations of our faith, that even when we fall a little bit into a pit lately, you know, Sandra's had some conditions during the pandemic, and the very lady that found our apartment came on Christmas and took us to the Van Gogh show and told us the next day, oh, by the way, I have COVID, I found out. So we got it in a few days. But hey, it's all part of the scope of things, testing our faith. And then lately, in the last couple of weeks, we've been revisiting this subject about faith. And it's been really joyous to look at it. So I read this one passage, right? It's in the text. It's called Healing and Faith. I just wanted to read this one paragraph. So it's from chapter 19, the attainment of peace, and the section 1, healing and faith. And this is like paragraph 13. It says, grace is not given to a body, but to a mind. And the mind that receives it looks instantly beyond the body and sees the holy place where it was healed. There is the altar where the grace was given, in which it stands. Do you then offer grace and blessing to your brother? For you stand at the same altar where grace was laid for both of you. And be you healed by grace together, that you may heal through faith. Be you healed by grace together, that you may heal through faith. That's paragraph 13 in chapter 19 of the text. So that really struck me. I think the first thing was, it talks about grace. Any of these absolute qualities that the Course mentions, grace, faith, love, joy, these are absolute qualities. And they're also intertwined, like you can't have grace without faith, you can't have joy without grace, you can't have love without forgiveness. These are absolute states, right? And they all kind of circle around the same core. So when you're close to faith or having faith, you're also close to grace. And the good part about that paragraph, which Jesus says in many different ways throughout the Course in Miracles, is you cannot have it without your brother. In other words, you have to include your brother in the action in order for you yourself to realize the truth of that thing, that state of being. So faith, and it's talking about healing there, right? So when you approach this altar of grace, which is this healing place, right? You're approaching that altar with your brother and you're saying, okay, I'm going to lay down all my attack thoughts. I'm going to lay down all my doubts. I'm going to lay down all my fears, all my guilts, all my anger. I'm going to leave that at the door, lay them at the feet of this altar, and then enter into this other space, enter into this state of grace, enter into this state of faith. And by bringing your brother along, it hastens your forward movement into that. It's like it makes the doorway clear. I was so fortunate to be with Tara Singh. Even looking back on, I can hardly believe that I was given such a grace just to have that teacher. Many workshops, more though in the retreats, certainly at the foundation in California and Los Angeles, there was always an altar. Okay, so at the retreats, there would be a special room for the altar. And he would set up an altar and he would bring the things from the foundation. He had an altar at the foundation, and there was something he had received from, he found it in an antique shop, but it was originally from a church, right? It was a cross and these two candlesticks. And he said, well, those are for the foundation. They're meant for the people. Like a church is for the people, right? So he had these altar pieces, and he would bring them to the retreats, every retreat, and he would set up an altar room, and he'd have an altar, white cloth, very beautiful altar. And then he'd have the the altar pieces, the two candles and the cross. Originally it had Jesus being crucified on it. So he took Jesus being crucified off the cross, and it was this beautiful cross with a sunburst, right? But there was no crucified Christ. It was just this sunburst. And then he had the two candlesticks. And then on one side, no, I think on two sides, there was a copy of A Course in Miracles. And then in the middle, there was a Bible and two chairs. So throughout the whole retreat, and sometimes the retreat would last for, 2 weeks. I mean, I went to a retreat that lasted for 40 days, 6 weeks once when I first got together with him. So every retreat had this altar room with the altar. And then all around the wall, on the walls, were these pictures of holy beings. There'd be pictures of Mother Teresa, Ramakrishna, Buddha, even had a symbol for Allah that represented Muhammad, because in Islam, they don't have pictures of saints. So even had that. So every culture, every high being from that culture was in this room, right? So you'd go in, there were a couple of dozen chairs where people could sit, but then at the altar, there were 2 chairs. So someone was always sitting at the altar 2 by 2. And he had it arranged so every half an hour, a new person would come. So if your time slot was 9 o'clock at night, you would show up and you would relieve that person on that side of the altar at 9 o'clock. And you would sit there for 1 whole hour. And then on the half an hour, the other person would be relieved. So there was this constant 2 new people always at the altar, and you sat in silence for an hour. And your time could be 3 a.m., your time could be 2 in the afternoon, whatever that was. But this prayer vigil, he called it, went on 24 hours of the day for the whole retreat. So if the retreat was 2 weeks, the whole retreat would have someone sitting at the altar constantly praying, meditating for the whole time. That was very moving to me. It was, first of all, talk about the depth of the silence in that room. Like almost as soon as you walked in that room, your mind just went kind of peacefully blank. And then if you were sitting at the altar, even more so. And then we were all praying for everyone in the retreat, and people would give names. And so there'd be a list of people in the retreat that we were all praying for when we were sitting at the altar. So we were bringing our brothers with us in this wonderful expression of grace. And it was really activating our faith. It just felt like such the right thing to do. And then our energy was going out to the world, right? It was going out to wherever we were. And usually we had these retreats in very beautiful environments. Near Carmel, there's Monterey. And near Monterey, there's this little town called Pacific Grove. And in Pacific Grove, there was this, actually it had been a Girl Scout camp right on the beach, right? It's called Asilomar. And then over the years, it was taken over by another management, and they made it into a retreat center, and they built new buildings. So it's this retreat center right on the coast. And there are sand dunes, and you can walk through the dunes, and you can walk to the ocean and go along the ocean. So every Easter, he would have his retreat there at Asilomar. And we would have, and that would be like a 2-week retreat. And we'd have a prayer vigil. And we would sit. And then we'd hear his lectures. It was like heaven on earth. So this is where I got introduced to this grace of this prayer vigil, and also this notion of including people in it. And I think that's another key factor in faith. It's like faith is not for us alone. Yes, faith, we have faith that our own personal affairs will be taken care of and maintained in order, and we give our attention to that. But then, okay, what beyond that? All right, if you have your own personal life together, what beyond that do you have to give? What do you have to give? What's your service? What's your extension of your life? Like for many of us who like to doodle and paint and draw, I mean, that's been a very meaningful extension of my life. You know, I think some of you have some of my paintings, and I really enjoyed that part of my life of being able to do that. So that's an extension of giving. And then recently, Sandra came to me, this was about 6 months ago, and she said, you know, you're really meant to be out there talking, and that's your work right now, is to be out there speaking to people. So then we started these Ray Talks, and I'm really enjoying them. And I think it is a medium that I'm feeling very comfortable in. And I finally kind of seen what Tara Singh imparted to me. There's this lesson in the course where it says the word of God is given me to speak. It's lesson 276, I believe. And that was certainly Tara Singh. He could speak all day long about lofty things. And he never had one note card, no plan, no nothing. He would just from the cuff, just start to share. And it was always what touched our heart and got in there, right? And saying what we needed to hear. And he could do that so fluently and so spontaneously. He could share from 7 o'clock in the morning till 2 a.m. nonstop. In every aspect of life, you know, you would be sitting there for lunch at the foundation, and he would be giving another session at the lunch table, you know, so he was just nonstop, the wisdom coming out of him. But that was his form, that was his service, and he was real clear about that. So over the years, you know, I spent 17 years with him, and then I had this kind of thing when I got together with Sandra. I said, well, I can't share the course. I have, Tara Singh was my teacher. I can't like do that. He was the one. And then Sandra said, well, why did you spend 17 years with them if you weren't supposed to share this material, right? So then gradually I started sharing. And then till now, I see that it's as important, if not more important, to my life's work than even the painting. Not to take away from the painting, but this kind of has the forefront now. And it feels right to have it in the first place right now. So I'm glad you guys are here, and I hope you've enjoyed this hour, and we have a few more minutes. Does anybody have a question? Come on, you must have one question. Yes, Norma, go for it.
Okay. So I can see having, like, you know, high faith in one aspect, but low faith in something else. Like, for me, it seems like it depends on what it is that I have faith or trust.
Okay.
So when you're talking about it, is it like a blanket trust for like
yeah.
everything?
Well, I think there are places you can apply it much more fluidly than others. Like if I said, well, I really have faith in our democratic government, I don't think I could really arrive too easily at a point where that would be true, you know? But if I said, I have faith in the extension of our work to reach the people that need to hear it, and through our diligent efforts, that's going to take shape, I have a lot of faith about that. But if I'm waiting around, waiting for Washington to have some epiphany and our government to have some kind of a great new plan, no, I don't have much faith in that. So yes, you're right. It does matter what you're applying it to. And you do have to do kind of a mental assessment of what are those most important things in your life that are meaningful, that require your faith, and then leave the rest of it alone. You know, I know when we first moved here to DC, we were a little bit more involved in the kind of watching the politics kind of thing, and it just never helped anything at all to do that, including ourselves. So now it's not that we have our heads in the sand, because Sandra does kind of look at the news every day and hits the highlights. And Tarsing did the same thing. He got his news from the newspaper machines on the street, right? The LA Times would be there in the machine, and he'd be doing his morning walk, and he would stop there and he'd look at the headlines on the front page, and he kept himself informed just with those headlines, right? And he always stopped and looked at it. So it's not like he was not paying attention to what's going on out there. But he always quoted this line from Krishnamurti, where Krishnamurti said, politics never solve the problems of man. And when you really take a sober look at it, it's true. You have this faction versus this faction, and this reformer versus this reformer, and they're always taking the muddle and just rearranging it in a different way, but it still ends up in a muddle. And that has been going on from time immemorial when it comes to governments and politics. I mean, not to say that, hey, we all benefit from certain laws. Like, we are glad that there's such a thing as a red light, so that when we enter an intersection, some people stop and some people go, right? And that's written in the laws, and it brings order to our society. So there are certain things like that that are very necessary, and the government is responsible for setting those things up, and hallelujah. But then all this other stuff, you know, that is all the complexities, don't necessarily help. And I don't have necessarily much faith in it. I can put my faith in other places to give me a happy life, and others bring people to a happy life. You know, I think that's the ultimate. We want to be fulfilled, we want to be happy, and we want to have faith that we can do that. And I think when we apply our faith to that, all the power is behind it. Life takes care. We completely let go, and then life takes care. And we apply our faith in the right direction. Or if somebody is in need of healing, you know, like people that we know. I just had a wonderful conversation with Marta a couple days ago, and I'm sure that helped lift her up. And I was so overjoyed after it. I was high for like a day from just that one conversation. So if we can lift another person up or lend them our faith, we lend them our faith. Maybe we see they don't have the faith right now, they're in a low ebb, but we can lend them our faith and pick them up. And that's a beautiful thing. That's the purpose of faith, is to help us pick our friends up, our people in our life. Hey, you guys, wow, this time flies when you're having fun. And usually I make this into a YouTube at some point down the line, but way down the line. So it's eventually going to show up there too. But if you want it for your use right now, please download it when I send you the Zoom link. Yeah, great. God bless you guys. We'll see you.